All right, I think we're not quite good yet. Where's my phone? Hang on, I gotta grab my phone. I'll be back in a sec. All right, we're back. We're good. You know, it's the ADHD. You put something down, immediately forget where it is. Have to go back and get it. So we're pretty good on Skein today. Let's see. Get my cursor on the right computer here. So I guess we'll start off by updating. Well, let's get this to the right size so people actually see it. Do I need this to be that? Let's see. Let's see what we've changed. Looks like I have something that I might not have committed yet. I think these traces are fine. I might want to include them just because. So let's see what the traces do in the first place. If you do rust log Bevy Skein equals trace, this is kind of like standard, Rust tracing library stuff, and we run the application. We'll get our game up here in the left-hand corner, and then we'll get a bunch of information. And this information is trace level information, so it's not stuff that you would want to like show all the time. But it does give you all of the information about all of the extras in the nodes that are kind of being processed by Skein. So if you do need to debug something, then I think this set of stuff, this whole set, these 3 logs are enough. So it tells you what entity is being processed, the extras that were on that entity, and the structs that were instantiated as a result of that. So if you have any issues at any point, you can throw on trace logs and say, okay, I'm going to go look at my application. I'm going to open, Bevy Inspector eGUI. I'm going to say, okay, I've got, I'm wondering why my, I don't know, spawn point isn't working correctly. So I'm going to look at spawn point. I'm going to say, okay, spawn point has a couple of things. Maybe it doesn't have the component that I'm looking for. Okay, it's 35. Maybe I go over here. Here's post process on 35. It should have the spawn point component. And oh, look, I just wasn't looking in the right place. It does have the spawn point component. But if there's actually something going wrong, then you can look at this and go, okay, well, here's the data. And here's the result for every entity. So in this case, I think this one. So this one has a couple more, right? Here's entity 40. It's got a bit more data. And then you get rigid body static, a cuboid collider, and then move on to the next entity. So like you can kind of debug everything. I think I like this as a tool to ship with the library when we talk to other people about it, which is what today's stream is about. We've got a thing here. We've got this library, and it is largely working. I guess this isn't post-process scene. Where's our code here? There it is. And then we needed to do this before we do another publish. So let's start off with this function is called post-process scene. It probably shouldn't be. It's not really post-processing scenes. It's post-processing like entities. Let's just call this like Skein post-process or Skein process. Skein processing, maybe. So it's a little bit more obvious. Is there anything else here that would be like useful? I guess the names, we do have names for everything. So let's do name equals names dot get trigger dot entity. Name is going to need like a debug on it because it is a struct and it doesn't quite work like that. And we do want to rename everything. So these are kind of like traces that I expect somebody else to look at. And they're not going to want to see trigger.entity or names.get whatever. They're going to want to see entity, name, and then like what function this is effectively. I think that's all of the useful information here. Maybe not all of the useful information, but it's enough, right? And then we're just kind of like dumping the extras here. I think that's the right thing to do. Where's my terminal? There's my terminal. Because if we look at this, we do rust log. Got plenty of warnings in my application. We do rust log. Skein processing. Extras is a string. We don't really want to do any processing here because we don't want the processing to be the reason that anything messes up. So like we could reach in here and just grab the Skein key. But if something is really wrong and you're trying to debug something, the Skein key might not exist for some reason. Maybe you didn't select the right thing when you were exporting. Maybe something happened or whatever. So we want to like show everything here just in case. I don't think there's going to be anything that's like megabytes and megabytes of data, but I guess somebody could put something like that in, and then it might be an issue. But these will get compiled out usually. I think that I don't know that I have it in that example, but what is the Bevy flock, Bevy new minimal? So there's a couple of templates that the Bevy community has been kind of curating, and they do like compile time restriction on how much you can log. So when you do a release, you don't get trace logs. So we don't have to worry about there being like too much processing or too much log spam or too much anything from trace logs because they effectively will not be in the release. This is not true for everybody. If you don't have that config, then that is not true, but it is what it is. I think this is an error, so that's good. And if we fail to instantiate the component, then that is also bad and an error, and that needs to be surfaced, but we don't want to crash the program. And then we're inserting this. So I guess we like going by general logging practices, like logging success doesn't really make a ton of sense. Here's an issue with the log. So basically we can't get a name for this entity. And I think we don't want one in that case. We'll just put none here. So we need to write okay on this log, because we really want a sum value out of that. Like we really want the name to either exist or show as none, not be like a Rust error. So yeah, here we see name equals none, which is great. That's exactly what we want to see. I don't know why it's name equals none. Maybe it's something that hasn't been processed yet or something. Maybe it's a separate entity. I don't know. TBD. It's definitely coming from the Blender file because there's this QBaker stuff on it. But oh, that might be like the root or something. There might be containers in here that have nothing on them. So that makes sense. All the actual entities seem like they have names. So like this one is called goal. And then if we looked at our Blender file, which I don't know that I have it open and ready to look at, but if we looked at our Blender file, we have a goal right here in the top right. One thing that's interesting that I set up, I guess, I don't know if it was between last stream and this stream or not. I don't think it was, but we can drive components now. So this is the cuboid collider from Collider Constructor from Avian. All of these, I don't know that all of these are working. I haven't tested like the more complicated ones. But cuboid is working. And we can drive cuboid, if we look at the driver here, from the platform dimensions. So here we have dimension 0, and that's looking at this platform. And it's grabbing basically dimension 0 is the X value. And Bevy flips these two. So it's like XYZ in Blender, but it's XZY to do the transformation. So we get 5515 instead of 5155, which we see in Blender. It's a little confusing to have that be the case, especially since Blender and Bevy will like do that translation automatically for you. It's a little weird to have to care, but I think that we will not know what's being used as a coordinate when we're instantiating these fields inside of the Blender UI. So I think we have to leave it up to the user to tell the components like which axis they are. So Blender will show this as it's expecting it to be, which is Y up. And then you have to know that you have to translate that to, if it's a component value, use the Y as Z, because Bevy is Z up, which is fine. But this is very cool because we can do rigid body, static, cuboid, drivers. These drivers stick around through, a file save and come back. The one thing I haven't figured out is how to do drivers through a collection instance. So we've got this crate here, and there's a crate collection under it. And I would love to like drive certain elements of that through that collection instance. Looking forward to using this. Nice. Yeah, I hope it's a little bit nerve-wracking to like have a thing that I've been working on for a month and then be preparing to give it to people. But that's what today's stream is effectively for, just preparing for release, making sure that if something goes wrong for somebody, like these traces, right? Making sure that they can just go like, hey, there's a trace here, just enable rustlog trace, let me know what you see for that entity, and then we'll try to work it out. Because I'm sure, I haven't tested this morning, but there are, I think I have actually a document for this. There are very specifically certain components that will never create a valid property group. And right now we just kind of ignore them, which I think is the right thing to do because, for example, anything that contains an entity, right? So anything that is, I guess, a relationship would be a good way to think about that. Anything that is trying to store references to an entity in any real way. In Blender, we don't have entity IDs. So like setting up a component that holds an entity to show in the Blender UI doesn't make sense. Because while you could do that in kind of like hacky ways, I think we will officially support that at some point in the future. Just because that makes sense. Like if you want to reference something inside of the scene, we should have a way for you to do that. And then we'll probably want to create the entity interface in a different way, depending on how we support that. So anyway, long story short, there are things that are somewhat intentionally not supported, and thus those components will not turn into property groups successfully. I wasn't finding it when I was looking at it because we aren't looking at the Skein code. Here's the Skein code. This is the 0.15 version of the Skein code, so we actually have to backport this trace to 0.16 or forward port. I don't know at this point. Development, maybe I have that in. Yeah, so we've got like primitive value types. We have small stir. I don't think I did path buff. We didn't do entity. There's a couple other like primitive value types that need to be handled and whatnot, but that is kind of just the way it is. So discovering those is really important. Because if somebody wants something specifically and they're not finding it in the UI, then we need to go figure out why it's not showing up in the UI. One thing that I didn't implement support for that I assume that somebody is going to ask for at some point is multi-element tuples, but I'm not convinced multi-element tuples are even worth it. Like if you have two U32s in a component tuple, why aren't they named? Like, what do they mean? You know? And somebody in Blender that's using it isn't going to know, like, oh, if this one is 0 and that one's 1, what do you, like, which value do you put where? So I think that kind of forcing that is a good idea because it will lead to less debugging in the long term and less user error. But we'll see. Somebody might be like, "Oh, I need this because it's a third-party crate and I can't modify it." Okay, cool. So that's the tracing stuff. We need to fix. I guess we can publish that actually. Now that I think about it, let's publish. Let's get off the Git main. So we'll add this. We will enable trace level debug. This is probably too small for people to see. Enable trace level debug for Skein processing. This is one of the things we're going to have to document for sure. So I'll push this. I need to actually bump the version on the crate first, which I didn't do. I always forget to do this kind of thing. Nobody's using it, so I'm just using like 0.1.2. I think I'm going to use the 0.1 for 0.15's releases, no matter what. Let's see. Do we have anything in the README? I don't think I have the README specified here, so I don't think it's even getting picked up. That's not what I expected to happen. So we have this on crates.io. The documentation for 0.15 probably isn't ever going to be perfect because I don't know that we're going to document everything in this README for 0.15. We'll figure it out. But on docs.rs, it doesn't have anything here. And I feel like this should be the README. Cargo readme. I feel like we're supposed to be able to include that, and I forget the syntax for doing so. Cargo docs readme. We don't have readme specified in the cargo toml at all, do we? No. So I should start with that. Let's start with that, and let's do a commit and publish the trace stuff. Bump version. Cargo publish. It should just go, but it'll build and test and stuff first. Live releases, as it were, live on stream, I guess. Or if you're watching this later, in the past on stream. I would say when 0.15 or when 0.1.2 has a bug, you can look to the stream and point out why. But I'm assuming that this has at least a bug that I haven't thought about. Cool, so we're published. Let's try to get back off of main. So that's Bevy Skein 0.1.2. Let's cargo run, see if we see the trace logs. You usually have a release hat on you. That reminds me of like companies who do like all day releases. Like they're like, oh no, we have to be safe, so we're only gonna deploy like once every 2 weeks or something because we can't ship a bug. Like, okay, what do you think you're doing to your application? Because it's not going better because you're shipping once every 2 weeks. Cool. So the traces work. We're on 0.1.2. I guess we should update some of this other stuff too. But realistically, this is just like a realistic Bevy app. Like I'm slightly behind on some versions. You know, I'm not on 0.2.1 or whatever. I'm using a Git version of Perf UI. Like things are fine. You know, this is what an average person is going to be doing. So I'm not too worried about it. You do enterprise development. Your release cycles are like every 6 weeks. Yeah, exactly. That stresses me out. Like I get shipping like, I don't know, every 6 weeks if you're maybe shipping to, you know, the iOS app store or something. Like something you can't take back, you know, something that is on-prem or something, you know, something somebody's going to go and do. And like, if it messes up, then it messes up for everybody and it's permanent and it's hard. And like, but like, if you're shipping a website every 6 weeks, something like that, you're doing something wrong. If you're shipping service stuff like SaaS stuff every 6 weeks, you're doing something wrong. I don't think this is built yet. So I don't know that everybody here has done this before, but if you do publish a crate, you can go to this page specifically, docs.rs releases queue, and you end up with a list of what's currently being built and a list of what's currently being pushed to the CDN. So we can go into, you know, Bevy Skein 0.1.2, and here's the available RAM, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Not too much information here. Nothing really has happened. But we do know that it's building, and we know that when this is done, then the docs will be built. So super useful page. Love that they have that up. This is also like, if you ever watch a Bevy release happen, this gets pounded with like 20 Bevy crates, which is actually really fun to watch. Okay, so I have a documentation folder in here. The one thing we need to do for the Blender add-on before that is I have this logic here. Not this one, actually. Where is my terminal? So in init, we fetch, and that's fine. In the fetch Bevy type registry, we do a write. Happy that's only in one file. I thought that was in 2 files at one point. So here's where we do our write to like the Blender registry file. To show you what this actually is, if we go to scripting and we go to the right-hand side here, which is like just a bunch of stuff. I forget what this is called. This is the Blender file outliner. If you go down to texts, which may not exist if you don't have any text files here, you can click on the Skein registry, and this, currently this is what you see. I think I'm going to format it. First of all, I think I'm going to make this like multi-line because this file otherwise is unreadable. Not that it's going to be like human read very often, but I do feel like this is just indents, right? I do this somewhere else. Let me find that. Yeah, indent equals 4 is what we'll go with. So if we're going to write here, I want to write something that's a little bit more human readable because it's not necessarily like going to be read by people very often. I do kind of have a suspicion that because that line is so long, that's what takes so long when we're like writing to that file, but I don't know that for sure. So a bit of a hunch there, but I know that there are other like VS Code or whatever doesn't deal with really, 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 really long singular lines very well and deals better with like many lines that are kind of shorter. So I want to force that to happen here. And then the other issue is here we need to actually remove the old file. But the issue with that is there's no documentation for what function to call. And then you get stuff like this. It's like, just use the X next to a text block. Okay, that's not really what I want. I've called clear before. I feel like it yelled at me last time I used it, but maybe I just did it wrong. So really we want embedded registry.clear to happen here, and then the write. This is, I guess theoretically, if anything goes wrong between the clear and the write, or like in the JSON dumps, you could end up with an empty file. So if we wanted to be safer about it, we could write this to a different file and then potentially rename it. I don't know if we can rename files though. And I do know that if you try to name something the same thing, Blender will add like 001 on the end. So we're going to just kind of avoid that for the moment. And I think that's all we need to do. We just need to make sure that that works. So let's get into Blender over here. I guess We save that. Copy in our new open Blender again. Oh, this was me checking how many lines of code. I've gotten it down to about 600 lines of Python, which I'm actually very happy with, honestly. So let's just make sure that this doesn't crash. I think the app is running. The app is not running. So we need to call this twice to make sure it doesn't crash. So if we go to scripting over here and we watch the text files, right, there's no text item here. If we go in here and we do fetch Bevy type registry, texts will show up and then Skein registry will show up. And you can see that we have like some issues over here, but nothing really important or major. There will always be, as far as I can tell, unless we're really specific about how we safe list and block list stuff, there will always be some pointer properties or like some stuff that doesn't get built correctly. And that is because not all components are technically supported. Like timers aren't supported. So any component in your app that is a timer, we would have to like do additional bookkeeping to figure out if it was not valid and then remove the whole thing. Which we could do, but seems like a lot of effort just to throw it away anyway. So here's our new file, right? So we've got the file. It's 24,951 lines long. So we are expecting this to not crash and also not grow, which seems like it is true. So let me like, oh, I don't want to save that. Let me put a little character in there and see if we can overwrite this. Yeah, so it is getting overwritten. This is all of the reflected schema information, which is now, I guess, human readable. It is 25,000 lines, and we've added some white space here now. But it is notable that when I added the white space, the operation happened a lot faster. So I do think that the estimation of having really long lines, singular lines, is causing performance issues for Blender is true. Because anybody that watched on Saturday knows that when I hit fetch Bevy type registry, like it can hang for a couple seconds. And it is not hanging at all currently. And I do think that just that line, that really long line, was the issue. So this is all good. I think we're going to commit this. I think that the extension is basically done. Oh, you know what? Actually, let me stash this. Let me check out main and let me apply. Because I'm actually not doing the... Let me just do like a sanity check here. Like I want to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes in the sense of committing to the extension, which I think is true. So the debug preference should be also on main. And I think that's the last, yeah, that's the last thing that touched this folder. So if we go to main, we have more. And the debug is from 4 days ago. So pretty safe to say that we have not accidentally committed to that branch. And I think this is it. I think this is the zip release. So if we commit this, actually, I don't want that comment there. That comment doesn't need to be there. Right? Like it's obvious that we're clearing that file. We wrote .clear. We don't need to also leave a comment there. So clear registry file and format output. Actually, yeah. Formatting output instead of packing it all into one line solves a multi-second Blender performance issue when writing to files. So just like there's a reason that we have this formatted, because in the future somebody might come in and be like, hey, this shouldn't be formatted. This should just be like packed into a file or whatever. And I want to have that documented. Like we're doing that for performance reasons, hilariously. Cool. So I think that we can do a zip up of this and a test. So let's do, I guess the question is, how do we want to version the add-on? And I don't have the answer to that. Let's do, oh, this is the game. There's also some issues here. Let's try to clean up the warnings here as well before we do the publish. Like bpy gets used, requests, I feel like requests gets used. I don't know why it has a thing there. Property groups, bpy is like one of those things that we just need to keep ignoring because it'll just be around. It's like the Blender Python package. So we have no warnings. I think we're good. I know that the Python tests are currently broken, but I don't know that I want to fix them right now. I guess I should. Let's at least take a look at them. There is, I guess, development here. Mild instructions for how to get this back. Need to run these things. And then we need to source it, which I think I need to do in not new shell, because it's just like anything that just runs random bash scripts. I feel like I should jump down into Z shell because, yeah. I wonder if we have PyTest installed already or not. Let's just try to run it. Yeah. Pip u install PyTest. I think that this will also not have the correct dependencies installed. Yeah. So we need to also do this. And this all goes into that little like virtual env add-on thing. There's like 15 ways to do a virtual env in Python. I kind of just found one that worked and stayed with it. And then left that open for 25 days. So we end up with these tests that don't really work. So let's get the editor over here. Because if I don't do this, then we're going to be flipping back and forth quite a bit. So we have the test running on the left here. This, I think, I think we've changed some code so that it accesses like a global context preferences, and that doesn't exist. Yeah. So this part right here in add-on prefs, I'm not exactly sure how to set that up for a test. So property groups, yada yada, key error. This is in a init, I want to say. Can't be in a init though, because we don't test init. It's in property groups. So context, preferences. I don't really want this to like hard fail. I wonder if we can test the development environment. The only thing we use this for is to turn some logs on and off, which there might be a better way to do, but I kind of plan to have some more logging and debug functionality inside of the Blender preferences for the add-on. I think that could be useful, especially for people debugging, because very few people are going to go through like all 600 lines of this Python code to figure out what's happening. So being able to print stuff out as it works and get that log information from them is going to be important. How do we do that? Check if Python is running in a test environment. You can check if the unit test module is loaded. It should only be loaded if the test runs. That feels sketchy. What do you think? Do you think that's true? Like, do you think that is actually true, or do you think that's okay? So let's do add-on prefs. Let's do if unit test insists modules keys. Then we're running under test, and add-on prefs needs to get like debug false. That's not how you type false in Python or the key name. Else we want to do this preferences add-on stuff, and we need to bring sys in. Wonderful. So, okay, no attribute debug. How do we make this an attribute on that object? Maybe I set the property up top. Maybe we get that directly from prefs, and we don't do add-on prefs.debug. Maybe we do debug equals false, and then we do nothing unless the unit test is not in. And then we set debug equal to whatever this is. And then we get rid of add-on prefs here. And then we test the tests, which are now failing for unrelated reasons, which is great. And then let's test Blender to make sure it doesn't crash, because crashing is bad. Crashing is not what we want. So fetch, value of object type UUID not defined. Okay, I think we're good. Let's do a check for what the debug value is supposed to be. I think debug is on currently. No, debug is not on currently. So when debug is not on, we still log stuff out. I'm 50-50 on whether these logs are useful. I think that this all should be hidden behind that config flag. The problem with this is that we end up processing hundreds of items. So I think actually the answer here is, well, let's see what it looks like when we turn debug on, right? So if we fetch here, after going down to the bottom, we end up with like too much output to even really read, but it does read very well, right? So make property for try-mesh flags. Try-mesh flags has this information coming from the registry. The component that we're working with here is this, and then we opt out for a couple of these types. This opt-out is really interesting because there will be a couple of types that, I think this is in property groups. Let's check the opt-out. Opting, opt. What's that message say? Opting out. Maybe it's in init or fetch. Did I put it at a higher level? Yeah, opting out for type path. So this is an issue. And this issue is that for whatever reason, the combination of Python and Blender doesn't like keys that are greater than 63 in length. So if we have an object and it has keys and values, and we are using the type path as the key, then these types are longer than 64 characters. Which means that currently you can't set Avian 3D's mask component because it's too long in terms of type path. The way I solved this in the other case that existed is we're now hashing the class names. So the same restriction exists. Oh, that's the test file. The same restriction exists for when we create these dynamic type classes, dynamic property group classes or whatever. So we capitalize the type path and then we hash it. I guess if we hash it, we don't need to capitalize it anymore. I just didn't change it. But the hash is basically, how do I put this? All of the error messages will include this hash as the type name instead of the type path, which makes it significantly harder to debug what's going on. So here on the left, you can see actually the type name. This hash here, s whatever, is the hash that we get from that function. I guess you know what I should do, actually, because we know how long this hash is. One thing that I am going to do is I'm going to say Skein here. And I don't know what other, maybe underscore. Does underscore work for class names? Hopefully it does. And then the error that we get here, or not the error, but so now it's very clear that this is a class that Skein constructed, right? So that's good. It's not great. I would love for this to be a reversible hash. Where I'm just kind of like MD5ing it right now, but in any case, that's going to be the same issue. I guess we could try to solve that before we ship this. I think that's technically the very last thing that prevents types from actually, like valid types from actually registering. Because if we look at mass, you can see that tuple is unimplemented in make property for lengths longer than one element. And we have a bunch of like bundles that are registered, I guess. They're tuples of specific components. And they're just tuples. So there's really no reason for us to support tuples because you can just add multiple components. But here we're trying to do make property on another tuple. Yada, yada, yada. Opting out for mass and center of mass. I think that the opt out is the indication that we actually got to it. So it's kind of like awkward. This is one, I guess, the library lib 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 levels deep. So 5 files deep. This is 6 files deep. So like these are long. They could be shorter, but they use the root or like the base type path. And the other thing that I thought about doing is we could say, okay, there's nothing else named collider mass properties. Just chop off the whole front. But that could change depending on what you have installed. And that feels like a really scary way to have a bug. So like if you installed collider mass properties from Avian and for some reason something else had, or like mass is probably a better example. If like you have Avian's mass and something else's mass, then the type path changes and that can break things. So anyway, all of that to say, I think that I'm going to deal with the hashing afterwards. I don't know. Should we do that before we publish this? Or is somebody like itching to use it? Okay, so PyTest. Property groups. And this is make our get data from active editor. Get data from active editor. Let's form to object tests. So this just needs to be true. I think that's it there. And all our tests are passing now for Python. I think we should have more Python tests. Maybe I will now that I've like fixed a whole bunch of other stuff. Wait, do we not need the Python? Oh, I guess we don't need PyTest there. Cool. I feel like we should have more more Python tests. I have a really low level of confidence in the Python tests, just in general. So if we do this with something a little bit more complicated, maybe component plus or component tests. Let's do a team member. Team member should be in here. Test team member. I guess struct is the wrong word. Component is def in the wrong spot. Def is in the wrong spot. Why are these so far indented? So team member, build editor. I want to see this fail. I think this is one of the problems we're going to run into. We don't get to set everything in tests for some reason. Like these don't get initialized. And that is different behavior than happens inside of Blender. Right, so has no attribute player, but almost certainly does, right? So that kind of thing is super awkward. Like we can't test team member because the player field doesn't get initialized correctly. So code that works inside of the Blender environment doesn't work inside of the test environment. I'm going to have to figure that out at some point, I think. I guess while we're here, though, let's do test hash. Did I call this hash? What did I call this? Hash type path. So these tests will definitely fail. We didn't import this, so let's add that to our imports. PyTest, these will fail because, let's see, component test player is going to have to be this. I'm not really concerned about these tests testing anything particularly useful. I'm more interested in these tests existing as a form of documentation. So if you want to look for what hash does for its use case, this is what it does for its use case. Like this is what we get out of it. So if you are a person who's considering working on this project at all, or wants to fork it or do something, then you have an idea of what this is supposed to be doing. Even though this is like not really that useful of a test for testing purposes. I guess we'll get rid of unspect. Okay, so other than the hashing for the other type paths, I think we're good. That would be... So in fetch, we opt out here. This is in the global version, I guess, of the... One of the things that we need to document here is going to be the way we kind of like hack enums in. That's why this is an issue currently. Basically, when we do this fake component enum annotations has name and selected type path. And then the other properties that it has are every possible component type path in total. That's like all of them. So what we end up with is the name here, the selected type path, which is the one that we want, and then potentially every key that is empty for every component, because we don't have enums. We don't have rich enums. And all of these components are property groups effectively. So they all need to go into that. And then I guess the question is, if we have component container, where else are we using component container? Nowhere explicitly, which is part of the thing that scares me in general. That is our Skein 2 collection property. So the thought process here is basically we're storing that data, right? And we want to hash it. We can't use type paths as keys, because if we use type paths as keys, then we have to fail on a bunch of them. So when we're accessing this later, we're going to have to use the hashed type path to access these. So if that hash ever changes, that's going to be really annoying. That hashing is going to get built into the blend file. I think we need to put more thought into the hashing. I think I'm just going to let it be broken for now. Man, I go back and forth. Like we can either hash it now and communicate that it's going to break in the future, or not hash it and let some of the components not be accessible. I think I'm going to leave it and I'll create an issue for it. So that leaves us with the release, and then how do you use it, right? We have working code here, fix Python tests, push that up. And then we need to decide what version this is going to be. I guess we're working with 0.1.0 currently, so I think we publish 1.0 with 0.16 maybe? I don't know. I think let's do 0.1.0 until people use it with 0.15, and then we'll consider 0.16 the official release. So with that in mind, we need to specify in our manifest like 0.1.0, right? And then improving the efficiency of Bevy Blender workflows is like such a terrible tagline. Use Bevy components in Blender. Apply Bevy components in Blender. That's more straightforward. People might actually understand what that means. Because this file doesn't exist anymore. Okay. I think that's it. We're going to do another little publish kind of thing here. Just build. And just build will build us a version of the plugin. Let's get rid of the old version. So Bevy Skein 0.1.0.zip. And let's get rid of this. And what is the directory? It's just list. L? Yeah, L. I think I want to go into this directory and delete it. Why does this not work? Application support, Blender, extensions, 4.2, extensions, user default. Okay, so here's Bevy Skein, the version we have currently installed. Let's rm rf Bevy Skein. It's gone. Not installed. No installation for Bevy Skein at the moment. We need to open the parent directory because we need this zip file. We need Blender to be open. I think I want to be taking screenshots of this. I think we'll need them. Can I view this as something that makes more sense? Can I open the preferences? What is our missing add-ons? Okay, fully deleted, I think, at this point. Interface 1.40. 1.40, is that going to be good enough for a screenshot? I feel like bigger is better. This is going to be our screenshot size. So in preferences, we're going to go to add-ons. And I'm going to screenshot this entire page, I guess. Save. Save. Okay. Save. Save. Screenshot, screenshot, screenshot. Okay. So it's enabled. We fetch. Collider constructor, insert, sphere, cuboid, length, add driver, single property, dimensions 0 on allow execution, cube, whoop, dimensions 0. What is this supposed to be? Var. Cool. And then we tab this, we scale on the x-axis like 6 times and we get 12, which is sick. That makes me so happy. Okay, so I think this is good, at least for like an initial release. So we're gonna do the thing. This is not like the official release. If you're in stream and you want to use it, you can effectively now use it, is what this is going to be. But I guess I tag this too, right? Git tag, or yeah, git tag Blender v0.1. I guess that's what I do, Blender v0.1. Push the tags. I know that my face is blocking my terminal, but it's always blocking something. We just tagged it is all we did. Let's make this higher. So git tag Blender 0.1.0, push that. This tag now is this, create release from tag. Blender add-on first release. I guess I don't want to attach binaries, but where's Rust? Rust. That's the docs. Okay. The very first release of Bevy Skein's Blender add-on. I guess I could always write stuff for this later. I don't really plan on announcing it until like at least tomorrow, because I still need to write all the documentation and stuff first. The add-on, I guess, is compatible. Where is my... screenshots? How to use. Download Bevy Skein.zip. Open Blender. Navigate to Edit. Add-ons. Drag this in here. Drag this in here. Zip file onto add-ons. Drag this in here. I know it seems funny to put this many photos and stuff, but I want people to actually be able to use it. Maybe I don't tell people about the debug option. I'm like 50-50 on it. I feel like debug is really a developer tool. And most people are not going to be developers of this extension, so they're not going to be able to read the output anyway. And there is a lot of output there that is like easy to get scared by. There's a lot of like, hey, this didn't work, that didn't work, whatever output there. I'm going to label this as advanced or like maybe a note. GitHub Markdown note. I look this up every single time. I never remember how to write this. There's a debug option in the add-on preferences. If you want to develop against the add-on, you can enable this to see a bunch of output. Note requires running Blender from terminal. And then we take this and we put it here. The add-on is meant to function alongside the Rust crate. I think I already have installation instructions in the README, but I'll replicate them here. I guess I want the whole thing, right? Currently released version is meant for use with Bevy 0.15. I won't even mention the main branch. No reason to mention the main branch. Workflow looks like this. Register components in Bevy. Apply Bevy components to meshes materials in Blender. Export to GLTF. Components are instantiated when spawning in Bevy. Here is the minimal Skein plugin, register type, Skein. I guess I should take more screenshots. Do I have Blender open? No, that's Ableton. Why do I still have Ableton open even though I'm streaming? I don't know. I guess up here. The Bevy component UI can be found in the properties panel under object, data, for meshes, or material. This, why did I get rid of that Finder window? Here's our screenshot. You know, I just realized that I didn't test this on Windows and I probably should. It's fine. This is the like first ever release, so if there's something wrong with Windows and fetching BRP stuff, that is worth looking into and fixing. But it is what it is. You need a running Bevy app with Skein plugin enabled to be able to fetch the Bevy registry data. Or from the edit menu in Blender. Where's edit? Here's edit. Little dedicated screenshot there. Once the registry is fetched from a running Bevy app, you can add components in the properties panel. Don't skip over that Ableton window without pressing space for at least 4 bars. There's nothing in that particular project, unfortunately. So no juicy goodness. Do I want a spelling mistake in the screenshot? No, I don't. No, I really don't. Whoops. Click insert. Scroll down to edit. Modified data. I think that something that's really interesting is the drivers stuff. So I think I want to put that in this. Let's finish. Yeah, this is the other thing. If you hover over this, it's like Skein AFFF1365.xlength. And I mean, like, that's all developer stuff. I don't think that shows normally. You have to enable a special option for it, but it's just kind of like meh. Like, I wish that that UI was able to use real strings. Where's our... Here we go. Type fields, components will autocomplete. Select one. Click insert Bevy component. Should probably get rid of the little dev thing there. It's no longer dev. This is now really the way that it works. Scroll down to see the currently selected components form fields. Optionally choose new values. And see new form for current variant. I don't know that that's... All of those screenshots are necessary. I don't know that all of that prose is necessary. Okay, drivers. Keep going back to Ableton. Just want to make music. Well, I need this developer menu to not show up. Oh well, I'll make a better screenshot some other time. Add driver, that will show us this. If you've ever wondered what it's like creating educational content, this is it. It's mostly screenshots. This is it. Type a little bit, make a screenshot, type a little bit, make a screenshot, type a little bit. Did I show the selection of the cube? I think I need to show that too. Actually, that screenshot is going to be full screen because the difference is going to be tab into edit mode and then scale 5. And we're going to see the difference visually both on the screen and in the numbers. Then export will happen. I feel like I just want to put this in a temp folder somewhere. Let's not include all of the random shit that I'm working on in these screenshots. Oh, did that take... Interesting. Did that take a screenshot of both of them? That's so interesting. I'm going to look at that later. It's technically the same application, right? But... So drivers are really interesting, right? Blender drivers can be used to power Bevy components. Right click on a value and select add driver. How many screenshots do you have to take before a release note is done? Driver form will show drivers can be as simple as a single property to as complex as arbitrary Python. True. I keep scrolling down for some reason. Select single property. This shows a new form. We'll select the default cube as our object, which I think I took a second screenshot to show. Yes, I did. We'll set the path for our property. This is going to be confusing for people because I'm using something that is like fairly undocumented. I think there's a list of these somewhere, but it starts to get kind of in that realm of X, Y, and Z length. AKA width, height, and depth. We need one of those like important. Blender's dimensions are Y up. So dimension 0 is X. Dimensions 1 is Y. And dimensions 2 is Z. In Bevy, Z is up. So we need to map X to X, Y to Z, length, length, Z to Y length. Okay, then we get the screenshot. Do this for all 3 values. I don't know if the values are going to be highlighted purple, so I won't mention it. I know that I'm using a dark theme. I don't know if everybody will see them as purple or not. I'm going to get rid of these, actually. Drag this one in. Switch into edit mode. Scale the cube up. Watch as the values grow as the cube scales. This is drivers. Okay. Exporting is the final thing that I think we need to document in the release notes. Bevy consumes GLTF from Blender. So we need to export it. The file menu, export, capital E export, GLTF. If you want to look at the output, can be GLTF. For production, you'll want GLB. I think while this screenshot has nice context, like we are exporting that, I think that we don't need the context because we were just there. In Bevy. Okay, the workflow looks like this. Register components in Bevy, apply components in Blender, export to GLTF. Components are instantiated when spawning in Bevy. Add plugin, register components. Then we can get this and spawn a scene from the GLTF file, which will have components instantiated on it. Okay. Let me copy this, and I think this can just be done. Right? Like how to use, bunch of things, tip. Using the add-on, adding components, clicking insert, choosing new values, drivers. Important apparently is not the thing. What is the thing for note, tip, important? I thought, oh, it's the brackets. Oh, exclamation point, bracket. Oh, bracket, exclamation point. Okay. I wrote it like a derived macro. they want it like this. Important. Blender's dimensions are y up, so dimension 0, dimensions 1 is y, dimensions 2 is z. We should find the link for this. Blender dimensions driver property. Is it really everything in here? Is dimensions in here? Dimensions is in here. I guess let's take this and throw it in here too. And that'll be our last thing, and then we'll hit publish, and it will be out for anybody to try. Adding components where it's important. Okay. That's that. Writing in a way that can be used as is for a script for a video almost. Yeah, that is absolutely the habit that I've gotten into effectively is I write in a way where if I read it out and do it in more of a human way rather than just reading the script, then you end up with effectively a video. That is also the way that I've found writing blog posts tends to work out very well. Because like, you'll see I do this a lot with This Week in Bevy too, which is very straightforward to port. So This Week in Bevy, like if you just read this, it reads almost exactly like the video. The difference is like some people like to read this, some people like to listen to this, some people like to watch it, et cetera, et cetera. Like people consume things in different ways in different places. So like the video doesn't need to be substantially different content than the blog post because I've created both, right? People like to consume things in different formats, and that's okay. That's not to say there isn't things that like you can do in video that you can't do in text. That should be, you know, respective. Like I wouldn't write 1,000+ word blog post and then try to make a TikTok in 10 seconds about it. Those are two different scripts. But yeah. So this is out now. Unfortunately, this does mean that you have to scroll all the way down. Sorry. Maybe I should have put it behind like a collapsible. I don't know. How big is this actually for? Yeah, I don't know. Shrug. It is what it is. People need to figure out how to use it. So yeah, I guess if anybody uses it, then let me know. It's out. You can install from crates.io. The docs should be up for the current version. There is no documentation here because the only thing you need to do is add the Skein plugin with the default. So like I need to say that somewhere in this documentation, but Like there really isn't like an API from the Rust side of things. It's all effectively hidden through dealing with the GLTF stuff, which is cool because you just kind of like get the functionality and you don't have to like do a bunch of scaffolding or anything. Yeah, I anticipate that people will try to do different things with it and potentially break it, but I'm expecting that. So GLTF extras, GLTF now has scenes, meshes, materials, etc., right? But materials is a vec to a handle to a standard material. So I think that if you reach in here and you start dealing with these things manually, you might not get what you think you're going to get, but that's just because of the way this data is stored. Right? Like a scene has a bunch of entities that you spawn in, but these handles to like GLTF mesh, I guess GLTF mesh has its own extras, so you can get those. Standard material, I don't think. Yeah, so like, I don't know exactly how you're going to get the extras here. Right? Like, if you reach around what Bevy Skein is doing and you go straight to the mesh or something like that, or straight to the handle to the standard material, then Bevy Skein can't do anything, right? I think that's what we want to happen, but I'm sure that some people will go into this GLTF file thinking, oh, first of all, like you can't spawn a GLTF mesh, if I remember correctly. You have to turn this into something. Right. If you try to use a node or something, then you can do it. Basically, if you want everything and you're looking for a GLTF node, then you have to also take this GLTF extras. I think that's okay because you have to process this anyway, right? Like if you're going to try to spawn a GLTF node, you have to figure out what to do with this mesh, what to do with the skin, et cetera, et cetera. So like that's normal. If you spawn a scene or anything that gets GLTF extras, all of that just works. And it fits directly into the way that Bevy and Blender kind of like communicate, which is through the GLTF stuff. And most importantly, it's easy to maintain. Right? It is not that much code in general. So I guess I should start with the first issue that I know exists already, right? That's a website. The fetch type registry processes these things and has the opt out, right? Opting out. So 117 in fetch Bevy type registry. That's examples. I need to update the examples too, but it is what it is. I think that's going to be the rest of my day is going to be writing out different examples and stuff like that. Operators, fetch the registry, 117. Okay, so Type paths greater than 64 characters long are too long for Python's dicts. When we fetch the type registry from Bevy and process it, we use the type paths heavily to identify components uniquely. This is a problem because Python, Blender don't allow keys in dicts to be longer than 64 characters. And it's pretty common for component module paths to exceed this number. As a result, well, problem, solution. As a result, we need to opt out sometimes from processing components. Do we have that in the logs somewhere? I think this is it, right? Character counter. Oh, that's exactly 24? That's hilarious. Okay, that's really unfortunate. I need the full, I don't need to save this. This doesn't matter. I need the full logs though.